education. Is it okay to continue while he doesn't work? Or should I stop? Oh, yeah, there he is. I'm going to take you back in time to the Middle Ages. The first schools were the monastery schools. Those were only for boys, a few boys only. That was around 750. Around that time, we also had the first laws of education. A little fast forward to 1300, schools we had back then were by monasteries and by churches. And around 1400 were the first independent schools, and were also girls allowed to go to school. They didn't go to school till that time. We can't imagine it right now, but it was a huge difference back then. Then we're going to 1600, the time of regents and kings. The education was really focused on the reading, writing and mathematics part. And you had a paper lesson. And the mathematics lessons were the most expensive ones. So school was not for everyone. And back in that time, every student get his own task. Before that, everyone did exactly the same. It's really based on listening. And from that time on, every student got his own task. Then we have around 1800 to 1900. We call that time, that period of time, the time of citizens and steam engines. From that time on, teachers had to be educated themselves. So you couldn't be a teacher before you had to go to school yourself. There also came an inspection for education. Before that time, there wasn't. And they started with teaching materials, like the blackboard with the chalk on it, maybe you remember it. And in the Dutch Constitution, they said there's freedom of education, so you could go to a school of your choice, and you could start a school of your choice. Then, around 1900 to 1950, we call it the time of the World Wars. It was more classical education, and they formed groups at the same age, and you see it in a lot of schools nowadays that the groups are formed around the age. In 1920, we got the law of the primary education. It meant financial equality between different schools. Till that time, the Christian and Catholic schools were paid by the churches, and the public schools were paid by the government. From 1920 on, every school gets the same financial baseline. So there was no more difference between the Catholic and Christian schools and the public schools. And we got some class organization, so the children got their own desks, their own working materials, and they work in pairs or in groups. So the classroom became more different than the time before. And now we live in the so-called time of television and computers. The school system is much more loose. As a teacher, as a school, you have way much more options to form your vision on education and how you do that on a daily basis in the classrooms. They started with a reading method. Before that, we had the leesplankjes. It was called Aardnootmies. And then they started with a method for the reading process. And we went from pictures on the wall to projectors to television to nowadays digital scoreboards. So that is in a really short story, the history of our education. Our system is based on 3 levels of education. The first part is primary education. It starts when children are 4 years old till they are around 11 or 12 years old. Then you get secondary education and then vocational education or university. First, I'll start with primary education. It's compulsory, which means children have to go to school when they're 5 years old. Right now, they're discussing if compulsory needs to be from 4 years old. So I think in a few years it will change that children have to go to school when they're 4. Now they have to go when they're 5. But my advice is when your child is 4, let them go to school. Let them get used to the system of a primary education system. With socializing with the same age children, getting used to how school works. So they have to start when they're 5. If they're 5, advice is start when they're 4. The primary education works with group 1 till 8. They start in group 1, Most of the time you see group 1 and 2 combined, and group 3 till 8 are single classes. There are some exceptions. It can depend on your school concept, or sometimes it's a practical thing like the number of students in 1 year. For example, in my school we had a combination group 5-6, because we had too many children for one group 5 and one group 6, and too less for 2 groups 5 and 2 group 6, so that's how we get a combination group. But most of the time you see single group 3, single group 4, and so on. The basic subjects we work on is the reading process, the mathematics part, the speaking, and the social skills. Those are the basic subjects. But we do a lot more than only those subjects. For example, the science part, geography, history, arts. Also the digital skills are really important nowadays. They do a lot with the digital media, and it's important that we learn them how to do that properly, how to use the devices, how to, all the information you get on the devices, how to say if it's true or not, to go to the parents if something happens that's not okay. So digital education is also really important in this time. Hello. Every primary school works with the core objectives. Those are goals for different subjects that every school needs to work on. And because of the freedom of education, every school can make their own decision how they achieve those goals. But every school has to work on the same core objectives. In Almere, we work with Passend Onderwijs Almere. As I won't mention it separately, but parallel to the primary and secondary vocational education, we have special needs education. I'm not going to tell a lot of things about that because it's a separate part of education. It's for children who need something else than regular education. But sometimes children are in a regular school but need something extra for their development. Then we have Passend Onderwijs Almere. It's an organization for whole Almere. Every school works with it to help us with some difficult questions about the development of children, and they have some experts on different levels. For example, the language development, or if they have a disorder in the mathematics part, then we have Passend Onderwijs Almere. Most of the primary schools in Almere have a continuous schedule, which means you start at around 8:30 till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They are at school between that time, and they have a small break and a lunch break with the teacher in the school, and then the school day ends around 2 or 2:30. Schools are free to choose how the schedule looks. So maybe you have a school that starts indeed at 8:30, but they go to 2:30 in the afternoon. For 3 days a week, and 2 days it's a little shorter, but most of the schools work with a continuous schedule. In earlier days we had a lunch break of an hour or hour and a half. The children could go home for the lunch with the parents, but nowadays the society looks different. Parents are at their work, so the school schedule has adapted to that. Previous. A school can have a denomination. In Almere we have around 80 primary schools. Half of them are public schools. 20 of them are Christian schools. My school is also part of the Christian schools in Almere. It's called Stichting Prisma. The public school is called ASG. Almeerse Scholengroep is short for. We also have 10 Catholic schools in Almere, and a few standalone schools, for example, the Islamic school or the Reform school. So if you're going to choose a school, you can also take a look at the denomination of a school. And we have something to choose from in Almere. Then I have a short film. I hope you can see it or can hear it. It explains how the system works after primary school, because I'm specialized in primary education. This will give some information about secondary and vocational education. So I hope it works.
Hopefully, yeah.
Dutch education system and the videos.
Finishes primary school, she can continue to one of 3 different types of secondary education, depending on the pupil's level. Preparatory secondary vocational education is vocationally oriented and takes 4 years. From there on, a student can go on to secondary vocational education. This prepares students for work or a work-related study program. Its qualification levels range from 1 to 4, with 4 being the highest level. After primary education, a pupil can also go to pre-university education. This is a 6-year-long secondary education track designed to prepare students for research university, where they can obtain a Bachelor of Arts or Science or Laws. After that, a student can continue studying to get a master's degree and do a PhD. So far, the school system in the Netherlands seems very similar to systems in other countries. But here comes the part that makes it different from most. Between university preparatory education and preparatory secondary vocational education, there is another line of education a pupil can follow, called Senior General Secondary Education. This is 5-year-long education that prepares them for studying in higher professional education. Higher professional education is taught at universities of applied sciences. This means that besides theoretical knowledge, the students will get practical, hands-on experience through internships, group work, and so on. A completed first year of higher professional education also grants access to the first year of a bachelor's program at a research university. After a student has received a bachelor's degree, he or she can continue studying and obtain a master's degree. Together, these 8 qualification levels make up the Dutch qualifications framework. The binary education system makes it possible for students to find a higher education program that best suits their skills.
Yeah, I think the video explains it quite clear, so that's why I chose the video. After the primary education, you get secondary education. At the end of group 7, you get a pre-advice of the child in group 7 to orientate on the different secondary schools we have in Almere. And in group 8, you get the definitive advice, which you can subscribe at a secondary education. And as the short movie showed, there are 3 levels of secondary education. The first one is VMBO, it's 4 years. After that you have HAVO for 5 years, and VWO is 6 years. And it's a flow-through system. As they also mentioned in the movie, if you have your diploma for your VMBO, you can continue at the HAVO, or if you have your HAVO diploma, you can continue at VWO. In Almere, we work with Kiesje School in Almere. It's a website. Every secondary school is on that website. You can get information on the school, which levels they offer, how they work, what kind of concept they have, and when you can visit the school, for example. In Almere we also work with DigiDoor. It's a system to inform the secondary school about the development a student has shown in the primary school, and you as a parent also get account so that you can see what the primary school says about your child to the secondary school. Yeah, I think that's it for secondary. I mentioned earlier that in the freedom of education you can choose between different educational concepts. Here I made a list of the most common concepts, and you have them in primary but also in secondary education. Most of the schools have a traditional school concept. It's based on the history I've told you, the classical concept, working on the course objectives. It's really teacher directed. The teacher decides which lesson you're going to do that day, how the schedule looks during the day. It's curriculum based, so what goals need to be done in which school year, in which part of the school year, and most of the time you work with age-based groups, as I mentioned, with an exception sometimes for combination groups, but most of the time you work with age-based groups. Then you have the Dalton concept. It's relying on the independence of the students and responsibility for their own learning procedure. You have Jenaplan concept. It's based on collaboration, learning through experience, and they have mixed age groups. For example, they start in a group 1-2, then they have a group 3-4-5. So 6 to 8 years old students are in the same group, and a group 6, 7, 8. And it's more based on learning by experiencing, so learning by doing it. Then you have the Montessori concept. It's self-directed learning, learning by doing, and self-motivated. Before we started, we spoke about how important motivation is for the learning process and what you can achieve. Most of the time we see with the youngest children in the age of primary school, the motivation is external. Because parents tell them to learn well, teachers tell them to learn well. Montessori concept really works with self-motivation. So it has, if you, how do we say, opvoeden? If you raise your child from a Montessori concept, a Montessori school will also suit your way of raising your children. But you need to think about is how the school works and if it suits your child. Then you have also the free school. And that's based on a really holistic development. So every aspect of your well-being or of your person is involved in the educational part. And then we also have the International Primary School in Almere, and that's preparing the children for education anywhere in the world. As you could see in the movie before, the Dutch education system is a little bit different than other systems, and the international schools prepare them for education anywhere, and it's only in English. Well, if you have to choose a school, and this is focused on primary school, if you have to choose a school, as I said, there's a lot to choose from in Almere. We have more than 80 primary schools. Then, if you ask me, there are a few things you can think about when you choose a school. The first of all is what concept do you like, what identity of the school is important for you, and what do you think about the denomination. That could be the first selection of the schools. The second thing I hear a lot when people come to my school for a tour or get to know each other conversation is the location of the school. Is it nearby? Can you go by bike, or can you walk to the school, or do you need public transport or car? And when they are young, you bring the children to school, but if they are older, can they go by themselves or not? So location is also important in your process of choosing a school. Then you can get the areas of interest of a school. As I said, every school has to work on the same core objectives, but how they do it and where they put more attention to it can be different in different schools. For example, you have schools who work a lot with digital devices, who do every subject on a digital device, or schools who pay a lot of attention to the arts and crafts lessons, are specialized in children with a higher thinking level. So every school has his own unique selling points, you could say, and what is important to you as a parent, and what do you think suits your child. There's a website, it's called scholenopdekaart.nl. Every school in Almere, or every school in the Netherlands, is on that website, but it can help you with the selecting procedure. If you go to the website, you can tick the boxes on the left side of the page. For example, if it's primary or secondary school, if it's a Christian school, public school, or Catholic school. So you select or deselect schools that doesn't match your interests. And my advice would always be visit different schools. If you have to choose a school, visit different schools. That also is the advice if you need to look for a secondary education. It's really important to see the different concepts or see the different outcome of how a school envisions the education part. As I said, the goals they work on mathematics will be the same in every school, but how they do it, it could be a really difference between different schools. So go to the school, walk inside, how does it feel, how's the ambience in the school, does it feel okay for you, or do you think, well, this is not a place I want to be, it's okay, but go to the school. A website can give you a lot of information, but does not give you the vibe of a school. And most of the time we say, bring the children with you when you visit a school, because they need to be there for 8 years. And it has to feel okay for them, because you do not want to switch schools after a year because you think it's not the right school. Of course, when you're going to move, you have to choose a new school, but if you're not moving, it's better for the children not to switch schools. And when you have a tour, sometimes it's a group tour, sometimes it's an individual tour, prepare questions, the things you want to know about the school. They have something on the website, they have something on the schoolgids, but what are the things you want to know, what are important to you, so prepare those questions before you visit the school. Then the registration procedure. Most of the schools say you can visit them for a tour when the child is around 3 years old. Our experience is to start a little earlier. Why? Because we have waiting lists at the moment. We have a lot of parents who want to subscribe the children when they become 4, but there's only so much place in the school. And when you visit the school when your child is already 3.5, a school can say, yeah, we have a waiting list, you cannot start here. And it's quite disappointing when you have this selecting procedure and you think, this is the school I want my child to be on, and there's a waiting list, so your child cannot start. That's really disappointing. So I would say start around 2.5. Check the websites. Most of the time they put on the website if they have a waiting list, and call the schools or send an email to make an appointment for a tour. There's a small difference, but an important difference in between applying your child at a school and register your child at a school. In Dutch we call it, apply is aanmelding and registration is inschrijving. And to apply for a school is that you as a parent say, I want my child to start at this school. The registration is at the end of the procedure when the school says your child can start at our school. And there's something in between. For example, the intake conversation. The first appointment you have with the school is to get to know the school, to ask questions about the school. And based on that, you can decide, I want to apply my child for the school or not. And the second appointment is the intake conversation. It's all about your child. So your child is also at that appointment, because the school wants to know how the development has gone so far. What they are good at, what they like, or what their things are that they need to develop more. We also have contact with the preschool, BSO, of kinderopvang or peuterspeelzaal, to get information about their development. To make the right decision if a school can offer the right place for your child and which group will suit best. If you have an average or a bigger school like ours, we have 4 groups, 1, 2, and then we can decide which of the groups will suit best. After that procedure is done, then you can register at a school, and then there are moments to settle down. Your child can start when it's 4, but a few weeks before it's 4, it can come to school a few times a week to get to know the teacher, to get to know the class, and when they are 4, they can start 5 whole days. Sometimes that's a little too much. Sometimes you can discuss it with the teacher and say, okay, well, on Wednesday I keep him at home because he's really tired at the end of the day, or you start at the school day from 8:30 to 12 instead of 2 o'clock. That's possible, because when they fall, it's not compulsory. You can make those decisions. But they can go to school 5 days a week. I couldn't find it in English, so it's in Dutch. The first thing is to choose a school. The second one is to apply for a school. The third one is that the school decides if they can offer a proper place. The fourth one is registration, and the fifth is you can start, or your child can start when it's 4 years old. In Almere, we have a lot of children who have Dutch as a second language, or sometimes even a third language. And that's not a problem at all, despite what some people think. But it's really important that they manage the mother tongue well. So that's why we say, talk at home the language which is your family language. They learn Dutch really fast. The younger they are, the faster they pick up the Dutch language. Maybe you've experienced it yourself, that your children picked it up really fast, and you as an adult are still struggling with it. The children pick it up really fast. And that's because they are in a Dutch surrounding. And if they manage the first language well, the vocabulary, the grammar, the Dutch language will come. So continue speaking your own language at home. That's our advice. Sometimes people say, yeah, well, then I'll speak Dutch at home. No, if you don't feel comfortable with it, just speak your own language. And read a lot with the children. Our Dutch education is really based on language and on reading. It's the baseline of everything. So if children like reading in your own language, then they're also going to like it in Dutch. And that will help them in the everything that will follow. Yeah.
I have a question concerning the aspect you just talked about now.
Yeah.
And
if a child is speaking their mother tongue of English at home, and when he gets to school, they said, oh, it's good for him it's good for the parents to speak their mother tongue. And when he gets to school, and the school could not even do anything to integrate the child into the Dutch society, and the school is still complaining that, oh, because the child cannot speak Dutch, so they have to maybe take him out of the school. In that aspect, what should we do?
Well, Almere used to have, or still has, taalcentrum. Maybe you were familiar with that. It's a primary and secondary school. It's focused on children who have Dutch as a second language. Most of the time they start at taalcentrum when they don't speak a word Dutch at all. Until 2 weeks ago, they had a Group 1 till Group 8 department and a secondary education department. So for children who do not manage Dutch enough to start at a regular school, there is a special school. They are focused on developing the language in a short amount of time. So in 6 to 9 months, most of the time, they educate the children in the Dutch language to prepare them for the regular schools. Last week or 2 weeks ago, they decided they are going to quit with the youngest groups, 4 or 5 years old. And it's not nice to say, but it's a financial problem. But on the other hand, by now we know children of a young age pick up the language really fast in a Dutch surrounding. So when they are 5 days a week with classmates who only speak Dutch, with the teacher who speaks Dutch and pays extra attention to developing the vocabulary, they will pick it up. Sometimes children find it more hard. There is some sort of disorder in the language development. Then the taalcentrum still can help. They can go to the taalcentrum, and there are experts on the language development to help the children to get back to the regular school after a few months to a year. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah, it's really answered, but is it, what I'm trying to ask, is it normal for a school to reject a child because of
Its language barrier.
If a school rejects its child of its language?
When it's already in the school, when it's already going on the regular school.
Yeah, then I think I understand your question. It's not normal because when a child has Dutch as a third, or second or third language, we know we need to pay some extra attention to their language development. And as a regular school, we have different possibilities to work on that. To work in small groups, for example, or a specialized teacher we can ask to help with the development. And most of the time we see in the first 2 years that they pick it up and they can continue. Sometimes we see that they stagneren, I don't know the English word, but they stop developing the Dutch language. And then we need another expert. And that could be that the school says at this point it's beyond our possibilities. We work together with passend onderwijs, as I mentioned earlier, or taalcentrum, to investigate what's going on. What does this child need to develop the Dutch language? And if it's something a regular school can do, then it can continue at the school. Sometimes the experts say, well, it needs this kind of expertise a regular school has not. And then they give the advice to go to taalcentrum. And then a school can reject at this point the child, but then there needs to be another school. A school cannot say, okay, I can't do this, you can't come anymore. That's we worked on it in the Netherlands. You can never say to a child, you cannot come here anymore, good luck. That's not possible. We always have the duty to find a proper place. So when it's in the Dutch language, we need to find a proper place with the parents, with the experts that can help the child in the further development. Is that more to your question?
Yeah, it answers the question, but how long does it take before they eject? I mean, just like the last statement you made now.
Mm-hmm.
If the school have to look for a way, but does it mean that even without finding a solution, they can just say, oh, for now, stay at home till we find a solution? Does that work?
In my experience, that never happened only based on the language development. The situation could be that there's more going on, but I don't know the situation. But in my experience, I never rejected children because of the language development when they already started at school. And then you have passend onderwijs Almere to help you also as a parent, because I don't know if it's your own experience or from someone you know. But there are organizations, and passend onderwijs Almere is one of them, to find the proper place, because it's never good for a child to be at home for too long. Yeah.
Question from me. You mentioned that recently they stopped or they discontinued the lower groups.
Yeah.
So do I understand now that in taalcentrum, children, bilingual children or children with Dutch language as a second language are not able to go to taalcentrum anymore because that group is already stopped? So does it mean that they would now be admitted directly in school, and then the school is now basically helping them develop the language?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my second question is about logopedy.
Yeah.
So where does logopedy fit? Because my kid had to go to logopedy.
Yeah.
He didn't go to taalcentrum.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to understand what's the difference between at what point do children go to taalcentrum, at what point are they sent to logopedy?
Yeah, well, really, basically children start at taalcentrum when they do not manage Dutch at all, or just know a few words. To start at a regular school, they need to be able to explain themselves, how they feel, what they need. But you see, if they go to a preschool here, or a kinderdagverblijf, or peuterspeelzaal, they know enough of the Dutch language to manage themselves in primary school. For example, they came to the Netherlands last week and they need to go to school tomorrow, that's quite a challenge, because they don't know a word at all. There can be exceptions. There will still be groups of 4 or 5 years old at taalcentrum, but those are exceptions. Yeah, so most of the time they start regular. The teachers will be trained. My teachers also get an extra training to give the right education to children who do not manage Dutch as well. Not yet. It will develop. Yeah. So there are also always exceptions for children who need the taalcentrum, but all the most common students will all go to regular schools.
And then for the logopedy?
Oh yeah, logopedy. Yeah, that's for children who already are able to explain themselves in Dutch, who have a baseline, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Then logopedy can help them with the speech part and the vocabulary. Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that it is not a bad thing when the school advise the parent that their child should be sent to that centrum or logopedy. It's not always from bad.
No, sometimes they don't need both. They can just start at a regular school and they do not need logopedy. But it depends on the development of the children, where they start, what their starting level is when they start at school. Or isn't that your question?
No, because sometimes we feel like a child is doing well with regards to language, and then school still insist that that child be sent to logopedy. So.
Yeah, there are different reasons why you can start logopedy. It could be the language development, it can be develop the speech, just the technique of the tongue. So it can be different reasons why a school says logopedy could be necessary. And to be honest, not every school is well equipped to teach children who have Dutch as a second language. So they need extra help from the logopedy. That's also a possibility. Because it's one-on-one attention, and logopedy is one-on-one to the child, and it can speed up the development to participate in a regular group.
But is there a criterion or an assessment way of coming to conclusion that a particular child needs to go to third centrum or logopedy?
Yeah, Taalcentrum uses a test. It's called TAC.
Is there like my child's primary school?
Mm-hmm.
Before they would recommend my child for logopedy or Taalcentrum,
mm-hmm.
is there a test that my child needs to go through in that primary school before they know that he or she needs logopedic attention?
No, sometimes the preschool also gives the advice. It's not always the primary school who gives the advice. Sometimes children start at logopedy when they're earlier, around 3 years old.
Because from my own experience, at the time, the school asked my daughter to go for logopedy for language issues.
Mm-hmm.
But we felt that she speaks language well enough to be able to cope, and she was passing her exams. But they said she had to go, and I was like, my daughter was taking my own kind of example when I was young also. All I noticed was probably my daughter was too playful, but she was passing. So I insisted that there is a test. They could put, so they invited an external examinator, and they conducted a series of tests, and she passed the exam. So, and then the external advisor says that she does not need any of those. So, would it be, that's why I was asking if there's a standard exam that will point, so that people don't just look at a child and see the way they look and say, well, you are not good for this, you are not good for that. So that's like subjection.
Yeah, there is a test indeed. And most of the logopedists use the same test. And for taalschool, there's also a test they need to take before they can start. And it's primarily based on the vocabulary. They know enough words to manage themselves. Then a Taalcentrum is not necessary, and logopedy is neither necessary. Yeah.
Just to ask something similar to that. Many of us in our community, I've heard people say they think it's a bad thing if their children are referred to go to logopedy or to go to Taalcentrum. Can you just help educate us more about that? The impression that most of us have is it's bad.
Yeah, and it's a pity because it really can help your child. As a primary school, we are a general. We are good at many things, but not excellent. And that's not that we are not excellent, because my colleagues are really excellent, but we are primary school teachers. We know something of every subject. We know something of a different kind of learning disabilities. To teach the most children in a regular setting. Sometimes children need a little extra. As a school, you can specialize in something. For example, my school gives leeshulp to children who need more attention, one-on-one or in small groups for the reading process. It starts in group 3, 4. We also have an expert for children who have higher thinking skills. So as a school, you can have your expert in home. If you don't have that expertise as a school, then in Dutch we say it, de doen een kindtekort, then we cannot offer what it needs for the further development. So something like logopedy could really help the further progression after that. It's not a bad thing. It's just most of the time a short period, a few months to a year, to get extra attention one-on-one in a small group to speed up the further development, because otherwise it will keep them back in the further steps they need to take. Yeah, so it's not a bad thing, but it is good to ask the school, why do you think my child needs it? That's a good question to ask. But if they say, and they can explain quite well why they think it can help your child, and the logopedy, you can ask her the same question. Most of the time it's a she, sometimes it's a he. Ask the same question, because it can really help your child. And also boost the confidence. Okay, I wasn't good at this, but now I went to logopedy for a few months to a year, and now I'm really good at it. And that's also going to help in the next steps they're going to take. So it's not always a bad thing. No, not at all.
Thank you very much. This is very good. I think that has all. Now, if I had known you before, probably I would have asked more questions, or I should have reduced my questions to the teacher then. So it's always good when they recommend. Let's ask questions, as she said, but it is not a bad thing that they go for.
Yeah, and it's good to know if a school wants something extra for your child, they always have to discuss it with the parents. They always have to inform you about what you're going to do. If you're going to do something extra, the school needs to take the parents with them in the procedure. And ask questions. Yeah, because most of the time it's to help your children further in their development.
You already said part of the question I wanted to say, because there are some schools, they have some special teachers. So when choosing school, somebody has to ask more questions about the teachers. There are very specialization about those teachers that teach the school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I have a case study about my sons also. Like when he was 4, he went to Petersburg, and then before we move, we have different kind of children of their learning skills. Some are fast learner when it comes to the language, and some still find it difficult to speak the language. And when you get to school, we thought the basic school is when they start to learn the Dutch very good, the communication with the students, and they can get more times. When we get to the basic school, within up to, let me say, 4 weeks, and then they say, he cannot communicate in Dutch to express himself. He said it in English, and then he found it so frustrating when other kids are speaking in Dutch. But the teachers there cannot give him full attention because he cannot express himself. So the son will feel rejected, and they will struggling, cry because he cannot express himself just the way. And then the school decided, it's not fit because it is a good crowd. It is a crowd of 1 and 2 together, combined with the 1 teachers, with the pupils of, let me say, 26, 1 and 2 match together. And there was someone who doesn't understand Dutch. It's like frustrating. So in that case, is it right for the school to say, out of our school, to look for other special school? Although it's going to a special school, which is very helpful, just like you said. But my question was that when we have the gathering together with the school, we saw the school some you don't need to merge 1 and 2 together. You need to group 1 apart, 2 apart, and get a professional teacher who can deal with. So in that kind of situation, what do you think it needed to be done? Because not my case, some other people have a case, like we coming from Africa, it's not easy.
Well, I think till now the primary schools had, it was a kind of a luxurious situation that they could say, okay, we cannot manage it, it needs to go to taalcentrum. It asks more of the youngest group teachers to see what does this child need to take the next step. The thing is, we have a lot of experts in Almere. If you don't have it at your school, then there are other organizations who do have the experts to come and help you at the school, because it's really important for a child to feel okay at school. And when it has difficulties in the language, it's hard. Try to explain yourself in another language as the one that you speak every day. It's really hard. So it's, first of all, it's whatever language you speak is to make contact with each other. Before this started, we had a conversation. The relationship you have with your students is really important to make the children feel safe. Even if they don't understand every word you say, they feel the language of the heart, as you can say, as a teacher. You become a teacher because it's your passion, not because it pays so well. In the meantime, it pays much better than years ago. But you do it because you like to work with the children and to make contact with the children and to see what does this child need. And sometimes it's quite hard to give the answer to that question. And then we need the parents. So help us understand your child, what can help him or her to take the next step. So get to know each other better and get to get the experts in your school to help the development. That's really important, because I'm the last one to say I know everything. There's so much I do not know, but I know there are a lot of people who are specialized in different subjects who can come to my school and help us with doing what we do every day. So if you have worries about the development of your child, if this is the situation, then go to the teacher, go to in Dutch we call it IB, intern begeleider. That's the person in the school who is responsible for the extra care. As you could say, make an appointment, do not wait too long. If you see your child isn't happy, if it's not feeling happy at school, make an appointment with the teacher, with the IB'er, and let's say to each other, okay, how can we help him, or how can we help her? What is necessary to take the next step? And that's, every child is unique. So it's not always quite clear what's the answer, but you have to find it together. Yeah.
Thank you. Please let's make the questions very short, so that she can quickly pick it up and we can continue.
Thank you. So my question is, I don't know if it has been answered, but how long does it take before the school decide that this child needs to go to a special school? And aside that, in addition to the question, so when the child is done, like maybe 6 months or a year, is done with that special school, will they need to join the waiting list again to start the school, or do you have access?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there are different moments in the timeline that a school can say, okay, what this child needs, we cannot offer it. It's at the beginning of the procedure when you apply at the school gets information from the preschool that says, well, this child needs this and that to start at a regular school, and the school can say, okay, we cannot offer that. Every school has this schoolondersteuningsprofiel, that's in Dutch. It's profile where they write down what are we able to do, what are we capable of, and what can't we do as a regular school. So the first moment the school could say, okay, I cannot offer the proper places after the application and the intake conversation. Then the child has not yet started, and the advice could be, okay, start at the taalcentrum. Then you have been already on the list for the school. So in the case of the Dukdalf, you do not have to you're not put on the bottom part of the waiting list because you already have been in my school. But I cannot offer you at that point the right place. It's also possible that the child has already started at the school, and during the first, most of the time they see it quite fast, during the first weeks or months, the school can say, okay, we cannot offer what this child needs. Now, then the first thing is to get the experts. What can we do in a different way to get the proper situation in the classroom? So what can we do as a school to keep this child in our school? Sometimes the answer is, when you've tried everything, we cannot offer what this child needs to continue the school procedure. Then we're going to take a look which school can be the right place for this child. In the meantime, the child still goes to school. Because in Dutch we call it zorgplicht. When they are at least 5, but also when they're 4, you have the duty to give education. So they can come to school and they pick up whatever they are able to do during the day. And then in the meantime, you're going to take a look for another place in another school. Sometimes this procedure is done in a few weeks. Sometimes it takes up to a half a year. Because the answer is not always quite clear when you start the procedure. So it's hard to say. It depends on the situation. And then the second thing is there place in the new school, or is there also a waiting list? Yeah.
And also, I think, particularly in Dr., a kid can still be in school while also getting additional help. Because I know my kid was in Dr., he was still going to school regularly, but he had a day with the local PD.
Yeah.
So that did not stop his school. He was still going to school. In addition to that, he was still getting help from the local PD.
Yeah.
Like when the child is want to start a new school, can't the former school recommend that child so that the child will not need to be on the waiting list in that new school?
That would be really nice if it works like that, but everyone who's on a waiting list wants to be on that place. So no, that's a kind of a bureaucratic system. Yeah.
Yeah, so my own is not a question, but to prove that all this help and support that we get from external parties are very, very important and beneficial. Because Shindara went to local PD from 3 years or 2.5 before it was recommended by consultancy bureau, and we felt, in fact, so many things were recommended, but they said he has to go to local PD, and then it took him there, and then he continued with local PD in Dr. And at some point, the local PD expert said, okay, now is enough. But one thing that made it clear to me now that it's very useful for us to take up this extra help. Shindara took up reading on his own, no help from us. His dad can testify to it. Now Shindara is in group 3, but they advised him to start reading with group 4 from like 2 months ago. So it's not like we help him in school. So I believe all this help became useful for him in the end. Yes. So let us just take it. If we have access to it, use it.
Yeah, if you're doing the right things with the right purpose, it'll only go to help. And if you doubt that, just get in contact with the teacher, with the school. Why do they suggest it? Because there's always a reason. But if you don't know it, it can seem useless. But most of the time it's not. But then you have to know it as a parent why you're going to do this for your child. Yeah.
I think we take the last question so that we can finish this slide. And then we can still ask questions after.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about a child transitioning from preschool to primary school. Are there no schools in the Netherlands where the child can easily move? I mean, the preschool has a primary school, and you don't necessarily have to look for a primary school for the child or be on the waiting list.
I don't think I quite understand. You are at a preschool right now, who is in a primary school.
Yes, I mean a preschool that has a primary school that the child can just transition to.
It depends on the rules, on what they agreed. If they say if you already are in our preschool, then you skip the waiting list and you have the guarantee that you can start at our school. But it depends on what they agreed with each other.
Okay, so there are schools like that has preschool and primary school.
Yeah. It's called Integraal Kindcentrum (IKC). There are schools who have preschool, BSO, and primary school in one. There are some schools and they're called IKC's. Yeah.
And the second question is, you spoke about denominations while considering primary school. There are denominational schools, there are public schools. Aside from the concept or core values, can you probably say a little more about the differences between those schools? Why it's probably important to consider if my child wants to go to a denominational school or a public school.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the fact that I understand that schools from primary school from age 4 is free. Is there still like any difference between a child going to a denominational school or a public school?
No, there's not a difference in public or denomination school. The difference is most of the time in how they educate the religion part. Even public schools need to educate in religion. Most of the time it's a really small part of the day or even nothing at all, is my own experience. That's the biggest difference. And what I think is a big difference from my own experiences in how we behave to each other, which words we use or don't use, how we celebrate with each other. There's a difference. It's Easter next week. In our school we have, where Easter is about, not about a bunny, but in public schools you will see a lot of Easter bunnies. So that's the biggest difference. Beside of that, there's not much of a difference. Now the most important thing is to go to the school and feel it. Yeah. I wanted to end with a few things to know. Well, the first one I mentioned was the compulsory education. It starts when the children are 5, but as I said, they are investigated. They wanted to pull it back a little earlier to 4 years, and I think in a few years children need to go to school when they're 4. It doesn't change a lot because most of the children start when they are 4, but then they need to go to school. Most of the time parents ask me, what do I need to pay for primary school? Basically nothing. Once a year you're asked for a voluntary parental contribution. Every school can ask parents for a contribution for school trips, to celebrate Easter and Christmas, for example, to celebrate Sinterklaas, and a school camp in group 7 and 8. And a school can choose their own amount of money. For example, at our school, I think it's around 45 to 50 euros per year. And when your child is in group 7 or 8, it's another 50 euros for school camp. There are also guidelines for the amount a school can ask. It's between 40 and 60 euro, I think, a year. And it's voluntary, so if you cannot pay it, it's okay. Because we know not everyone has as much to spend, and your child can still go for a school trip. As I said, your child needs to go to school 5 days a week when it's 5 years old, but it can happen. If it's sick, of course, you can call it sick by sending a message to the teacher or leave a voicemail. It depends on how the school of your child wants to have that information. And there's also a possibility to ask for a leave request. Sometimes there is happening something cheerful like a wedding or something less cheerful as a funeral, and you can ask for a leave request. For you, it's important to know sometimes it's family that's not in the Netherlands, it's further away, so you can ask up to 2 school weeks, 10 school days, a leave request if you need to visit another country, for example a funeral or a wedding, and that's good to know. And that the leerplichtambtenaar in Almere, I don't know how to translate that, but they give permission if you need more than those 2 weeks. If there's something going on why you need more than 2 weeks, you need to go to the leerplicht. If it's in between 2 school weeks or 10 school days, the principal can give you permission to go. And I think that's good to know, because sometimes I heard after it happened, we couldn't leave because my child has to go to school. No, you have the right to ask for 2 weeks if you need to go abroad, something like that. And in the end, I mentioned a few websites you can check for information. Those are all Dutch websites, but some have the option to translate. The onderwijsinspectie.nl, as I said, we have an inspection that checks every school once they said once per 4 years, but sometimes it takes a little longer, to check if they educate well, if the safety for the children is okay, if they reach the goals they need to reach. And on this website you can find a lot of information about what a school should do to be a good school. Scholen op de kaart is the website to choose a primary or secondary school. As I mentioned in the procedure to choose a school. Kies je school in Almere is if you're looking for a secondary school from group 6 on most of the time. Then there's a website oudersenonderwijs.nl. For example, it prepares you for the conversation when you have a tour at a school, the things you can ask, things you want to know about a school. And the last one is taalcentrumalmere.nl. If you get the advice that your child needs to start at that school, you can find all sorts of information on that website. And that was also the end of my presentation.
First, more questions. You mentioned that you can take 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it just for any reasons, or must there be?
No. It needs to be heavy-weighted circumstances. For example, a funeral, or that you need to say goodbye to a family member because you know they are not going to be around us any longer. There are some circumstances. They are, in our case, they are on the back side of the form, but you can always ask me.
Not for vacation.
No, not for vacation. I'm sorry.
So let's after that. Like when you finish with them.
So this question is about. Could you talk more about how performance is graded? And then the tools that the school does, and then determination of whether you go to VVO or that will proceed.
Yeah. Can you go a few slides back to the one with the boxes with the different secondary educational parts? And as your question, the 2 weeks are per incident, I could say. Yeah. Every student can start at primary education in group 1 at the age of 4.
Sorry.
You saw the small thing at the part that was special needs education. I didn't pay that much attention because it doesn't happen that much often. But you can also start at special needs education when you're 4 years old. At the end of the primary school, in group 7, as I said, you get the pre-advice. And it's based on 4 components. First of all are the results of the tests. Twice a year they do the CITO tests, maybe you know the name CITO. And you get a graphic from the development on the language, spelling, reading and mathematics. That's one part that counts in the advice procedure. The second thing is how do they at the school tests, so the regular tests they do every few weeks for the mathematics lessons, the reading lessons, the language lessons. Another part is how do they learn? Do they learn by reading a lot, by asking questions, or working together, or doing things with your hands, being more practical? And the last one is the motivation. If children are really willing to achieve something, or they are more laid back. Because when they go to secondary education, the teachers over there think it's really important that besides the fact that they have good grades, they also want to work for it. And that's not, you cannot check that by a test. It's based on the observations of the teacher. And that's why not only the teacher of group 7 gives the advice, but there's a commission of procedure. In our school, it's the teachers of group 7, so all the teachers of group 7, the teachers of group 8, the IB and the ME as well. So together we take a look at the results, about how the student has developed, how it's learning, and that makes the pre-advice. When you have the conversation in group 7, this also will be explained to you and your son or daughter. And that same procedure we're going to do again in group 8, but then we also have the doorstroomtoets. Until a few years ago it's called the eindtoets. and it's a test every Group 8 student in the Netherlands has to do, and it gives an advice. And most of the time it's the same advice as the primary school has given, and that's also the advice the secondary school is going to use to place your child in a class at secondary school. So it's based partially on grades and partially on how do the children learn and how well are they motivated. Is that an answer to the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I think a quick follow-up to that is, so these conversations starts at Group 7, Group 8, but however they are looking at their test results and how they learn from Group 1, 2 or 3 or something. So they already start looking at how they learn and how they perform from Group 3, even though the conversation holds at Group 7 or 8. And then second to that is, as a parent, can I disagree with your pre-assessment? And if I disagree, what options do I have as a parent?
Yeah, well, it's really, the short answer is the secondary school is going to take the advice from the primary school. So, do you have something to say about it? Well, in that matter, no. But of course, as I earlier said, you also know your child very well. So sometimes we end up in a conversation with the parent to also get the information of the parents also in the procedure on what is the advice. But the thing is, the secondary school mostly first looks at the grades. And as I've been a teacher of Group 8 for more than 10 years, and I always say the child is way much more than a grade. So it's important to tell something about the student, what is he good at, but also what does he still needs to learn. And the secondary school, if the grades aren't suitable for the level of secondary education, they want to hear a good story from the school to place the child on that level. And I've had a lot of conversations with good stories, and most of the time they place the child on the level we think will suit the best. But the secondary education, they have the final decision in where they are going to place the child. And most of the time they follow the advice of the primary school.
I just want you to explain this for me, because years back my daughter, they advised that she will be doing tail.
Yeah.
And at the end of the end tooth, they called us that she will be doing VVO. Then I'm like, what happened between that very, very short time? What really happened?
Well, the thing is, we do not have a looking glass. That's what I say most of the time. When the children are at our school, at the primary school, most of the time they are external motivated. They do school because the parents say they need to go to school and because the teachers say you need to do your best. What we see, and we spoke about it before, sometimes my former students come back to school and to tell me how they are doing. As you could say, they've seen the light. They really want to achieve something. They want to work for something. The school matches their way of learning way much better than a primary school, because a primary school has all levels of education in one group, to be said. A secondary school is split up.
I'm talking about buses.
Yeah, but it depends on how the students learn, what grades they are getting, what a primary school teacher sees, how they learn, and 2 years can make a lot of difference. And sometimes it would be easy for us that we can take a look in the future and see, okay, this is our advice, because we know you're going to achieve that. But that's not what we know at the end of the primary school. We need to make the pre-advice and the advice based on the information we have at that point. And sometimes we see there's a lot of motivation, a lot of energy to achieve something that's really going to help if you want to achieve something. Even if the grades aren't at that level, but if you want to achieve something, that can make a difference. But we're not, we can't see in the future. So sometimes we're wrong because we're people. Yeah, and I'm sorry for that.
I just want to bring to my question, because I had a conversation with the teacher of my school, our daughter, and I said, I like the way you say sometimes you guys are wrong, because I asked, who's going to decide it? which part of the school, to get to the secondary school. They said the school we decided. So why would the school decide whether the child go to Avo, or Abiyo? That the school have to decide. And then I would ask, why? Like, what grade does it need to be maybe Avo, MBO? I want to know the kind of the grade.
Yeah. Well, the VWO is quite clear. For the grades, you all need A scores or 1. It depends on whatever test the school is using. It all needs to be 1 scores on CITOs or the A scores. And if a child has that profile, then there's not much to talk about because it's quite clear. The important thing comes when the grades aren't at the same level as what we see what a child is capable of doing in the next few years. And it has happened sometimes that we made a pre-advice or an advice with our commission at our school. We had a conversation with the student and the parent, and we changed the advice. Because in the conversation with the parent, we said, yeah, well, if you have such a good backup team at home, if everything is well organized, because they need to study hard for the HAVO VWO, then it's possible to heroverwegen, it's called, the advice. Yeah, but sometimes if we cannot explain it to the secondary school, they are not accepting another advice than what the grades show us. And that's not like it's happening every day. And another important part is that our education system is really based on language, on the Dutch language and on the reading process. And we know a lot of children who have Dutch as a second language are not on the same level of the reading part, Dutch reading part, as the children who have Dutch as a first language. Till a few years ago, children were really punished for the fact that they weren't that much strong in the reading part of education. To picture it, there were 3 subjects really important for the advice procedure. What weighed for almost 50% was het begrijpend lezen, the reading part. And then 30 to 40% the mathematics and 10% the spelling part. So that makes quite clear how important the reading part was for your next level in secondary school. And the last few years we got the insights in the secondary education that children who have Dutch as a second or third language, it's not that they are not able to read, it's that they find it hard in Dutch. And that's something different than not knowing what to read or not understanding what you're reading. It's just the translation of that process. And that is the new insight that it's less heavyweight than it was. And there is a new first class, it's called the Kopklas. A few schools in Almere have the Kopklas. It's for children who have finished Group 8, have high potential of learning, but do not manage the language enough. They can go to a 1-year class to boost up the language and then continue to HAVO VWO. And that's a new setting for children to still can go to HAVO VWO, but do not quite enough manage the language to start at a HAVO VWO. And I thought it was the Kopklas, not Kansklasse, but I thought Kopklas.
Sorry, there's one question from online. So the question is that there's someone that has. My question is, what can I do if the knowledge of the Dutch language is considered low for a student of 17 years old? So the child is 17 years, but the Dutch language is considered very low. What advice can you give such a person?
Yeah, that's not my area of expertise. I know it's all around 12 years old. I know Taalcentrum has also a secondary part, secondary education part, to teach students who are in the age of secondary school. I know there are secondary schools who have TTO, or just bilingual education. It's a really specific question. I do not have more to that than this. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So my son is 14, so we actually went through the Taalcentrum class routes. I feel that if you do have a low if the teacher says that that this child has a low understanding of the task of the language, that's already deficit, because the child will most likely end up with a VMBO. And naturally, Africans are very learned, and we consider the VMBO a lower, kind of status.
Yeah.
The option is for that child to learn the language, or that you find a private school where the language is a secondary language, it's just a subject. So Dutch, international schools also exist at secondary school level, where you can put that child, they learn in English, but they have Dutch as one subject. So it's one subject, and then your child is still doing as brilliantly as expected.
Yeah, and I think it also needs a change of mindset in primary schools. And it also has to do on where your school stands. Originally, I'm from Friesland, province up north. There, everyone speaks Dutch or Fries. And they're not so much used to children have Dutch as a second language. It has a quite conservative mindset. And now, if you ask me, it's also asked for a change of mindset. Of course, they need to develop the Dutch language. Because if you want to make a career or continue your education path, make a career, it's way much easier when you manage the Dutch language as well. But it feels like the last years children are punished for the fact that they do not speak Dutch as a first language, and that asks a change of mindset. And I think with now the change that the younger students started a regular school, that also will help that mindset. It doesn't solve the problems who have already been in the past, but I think in the next decade it will help children to achieve whatever they want. Yeah.
Well, looking at these groups of categories of people level for the primary school pupils. The children that ends up at BB, KB, and tier. So where do they end?
It depends. If they have done the VMBO, they can get up to the MBO and prepare themselves for a job. So they, some schools offer them combined. So you start at VMBO, but also after the second year, you're already prepared for a job. So you can, then your school career starts, you could say. After VMBO, they can also switch to HAVO. So when they get the diploma of VMBO 4 TL, in earlier days it's called NAVO, they can go to HAVO. Also for BBL students, but then they most of the time what they do is first start at MBO and then do an MBO 4, and then you can also go to HBO. There are a lot of different ways to flow through the system, but it takes up longer, of course, and you still need to be motivated. And the difference between BBL in how they are learning, how they are doing in the school career, they are really orientated on practical subjects, is completely different to HAVO VWO. It's way much more theoretical. And that's why it's also important to take a look at how does your child wants to learn, and how what does suit him or her in the learning process. Because it's not a bad thing that you do a way much more practical direction than a theoretical, but you need to be happy with it, and you need to be okay with it, that you have the feeling, okay, I'm doing what I want to do. And on whatever level it is, I've seen students doing really well on the BBL, but I've also seen students doing really well on the gymnasium. And they were both equally happy, but doing something completely different. And that's, depends on the different parts of how a child develops and the support they get from home. That's also really important.
So somebody that is probably a late, someone that develops late, this gives room for them to discover themselves along the line, although it comes with additional number of years. to really actually meet up with VVO or HBO, and they can probably also end their studies earlier and they start working at lower level.
Yeah, and what's quite popular also is that they start working but do, for example, in HBO education part-time. So part-time working, part-time studying.
And lastly, the HAVO prepares operas for HBO, and VVO prepares for VVO. Now, you said that, of course, that HBO, they are more exposed to practicals and HBO graduates. Now, VVO, somebody that go through HBO to VVO or to VVO, they are exposed to both the theory and the practical. So when you think about the job opportunity for them, somebody that do VVO and HAVO would, and because VVO is highly rated than HAVO probably, but it looks as if HAVO have more advantage than VVO. Will you just tell us the difference between in terms of job opportunity in the future?
Yeah. HBO is, in the last decades you've seen that jobs who used to be university jobs changed to HBO jobs. For example, we used to have the lawyers who have done university, but now you have, I don't know how to say it in English, juristen. Those are HBO's, have done the HBO and are way much more focused on the database tasks. More practical. Yeah, so I think, well, a few years ago you had the most success of job guarantee was in the MBO. We have short of MBO school people who do the practical jobs and the technical jobs. If you want to paint your house, sometimes you have to wait more than a year before someone is available. Because in the last decades it was really stimulated to go through higher education, and everyone wants an HBO or a VO job, while the most jobs were at the MBO part. And I think that's always fluctuates during the years. And I think also the difference between university and HBO is the amount of working with your head in theoretical and practical. The people who study education on a university level are not in the school on a daily basis. The people who study education and become a teacher on HBO are in the schools, are teaching the children, are helping the children. And I think, to make a difference between that could be a difference.
I think we have some questions online. I think you've answered one of them, but maybe you can help explain. Someone is asking, what can parents do when they disagree with the decision of BSO to send a child of less than 4 years to a special school because the child cannot express himself fluently? What does a special school mean? So that's the question. I think you've answered it before, but if you could just give a quick recap of that.
If the preschool, kinderopvang of peuterspeelzaal, see that a child is not yet ready for a regular school, they give the advice to investigate the special needs school. Passend onderwijs Almere is how do you say? Passend onderwijs Almere, those are the people in Almere to help with that route to special needs education. So what can you do? Of course, a 4-year-old cannot make the decisions on its own. Parents need to do that with preschool, with Passend onderwijs Almere. First, they need to know what does this child need. What does this child need? And that's quite hard to tell when they are so young. So most of the time they go to an observation group. It's with 4 or 5 year olds to take a close look at what does this child need to come to further development. And yeah, as a parent, it's important to stay in touch with the preschool and passend onderwijs Almere. If there's not yet a preschool, a primary school involved, those are the people you need to talk with and ask a lot of questions to get yourself clear. What does my child need, and which school suits the best? Because we have a lot of different schools in Almere, different settings in Almere for special needs education, and every case is unique.
Thank you. And another question is, what is the work of Kentalis?
Yeah.
And what organization can a child be sent when the BSO teachers are complaining about lack of concentration?
Lack of concentration can be the effect of a lot of different things. So that's hard to tell. It could be that the way that the subject is offered doesn't suit the way of learning. As I said, you have different concepts of education. It could also be that when they become older, it solves itself. It's just part of the age. In some cases, when children become older, they get research and there is a diagnosis, for example, ADHD, but that's in really rare situations. Most of the time it's just in the age, but the experts know. If they see it in the 3 years that a child has been to their preschool, then you may expect that they know what they are talking about. You mentioned Kentalis. Kentalis is the institute who does research for language disorders. Sometimes a child, if Dutch is a second language or not, a child has a disorder in his language development, which means that the development doesn't follow the standard procedure, and that the child has really difficulties with understanding what the teacher says, difficulties with expressing himself, and as we mentioned earlier, a child can feel really bad in that situation. It needs special help. Kentalis does that research. They can say, well, you have this learning disorder or you have not, and what could be the best extra help for this child. There is a special school in Almere. It's called the Alexander Roosendaal School. That's a school for children who have TOS. It's taalontwikkelingsstoornis in Dutch, and they have specialized teachers to help the children with this learning disability. Language disability.
Yeah, thank you. And then one other question is that for a full-time working parent who goes to the office every day, is it necessary for a child to attend a preschool to learn the language, or can this also be done at the daycare? So I think the person will be asking preschool, Peter Spelzaal, or just the regular daycare.
Yeah, that depends on the program of the regular daycare, because we have a lot of different daycares, and every daycare has its own program. Some of them do a lot of the language development and is preschool and kinderopvang 1. It's combined. Some kinderopvang only do the opvang part and not the learning part. So it really depends on whatever kinderdagverblijf you are. If it's enough for the language development or that you need preschool, and a good daycare should start a conversation with parents, we think your child needs preschool. So a good daycare would start that conversation. If they cannot offer enough for the language development, they should offer that the child also needs to follow preschool.
Follow back to VVO AVO. If your child is still small, in group 1, 2, 3, and go, what are the areas to focus on now so that by the time they get to that stage, they get a good recommendation for VVO?
Reading. Reading is really important. that they have fun in reading, and reading process starts when they are 1 year old, or even before that. That you read the books with the children, let them listen to listening books, they explore the picture books when they are young. In our education system, reading is really the basic for the school success. And if they are reading in their own language or in the Dutch language, that doesn't make that much of a difference. So if you're reading the picture books in your own language, it's perfectly fine. But reading does something to the brain that really helps in everything that follows after the first 3 years. And if they think reading is fun, that's half of the job. Because nowadays we have the screens who are a concurrent of the book. And that's okay, because that's the time we live in. But you see, with a lot of children, they don't like to read books. And that means they don't read a lot. And it's such a pity, because reading is really important. So we have to keep it fun, and they have to read a lot. And you can start it in group 1.
2 questions. The first thing is, from our questions, you would already see that we have a feeling that MBO or RBO is probably not the right for our children. We don't want our children to go to the university. So I just want to ask, from your professional experience, is there really anything wrong in children going to MBO or going to RBO?
No, if you ask me as a teacher, I said before, you become a teacher because you're passionate about children. And you want children to be happy. And not everyone is happy in the university. That's a fact. And besides that, it's also how they are motivated, of course, what they are willing to achieve, how they learn, what are their talents, and how. If you ask me, a child who is happy will achieve what will suit him or her the best. That's my personal opinion, and partially also my professional opinion. Because we see children at a very young age being depressed if they have to do something which they are not capable of. Because sometimes that happens, and it really hurts my heart to see children being that much sad because they need to do something which they can't do. Yeah.
That comes from where I want to ask that in primary school, the school give an advice. If the advice that the school gave does not go well with the behavior or with the standard of the child, and the child ends up where he or she doesn't want to, that will cause a kind of depression in the level where the child is being subjected to. How can we correct that?
Yeah, that's a question that's really hard to answer, because we're talking about people, we're not talking about systems. And as I said, if we could take a look at a few years in the future, then we would all know what we should do, what would be the best for the children. As I think it's also important to listen at the children themselves. When they are in group 6, 7, 8, most of the time they are perfectly capable of telling us as a teacher or you as a parent, what do I want, what do I like, how do I envision my next school step. And of course they do not have the life experience as you have as a parent or we have as a teacher, so sometimes we need to help them with the bigger picture. But it's really important always to be the supporter of your child, that you always have their back as a parent, and you have to share what you think is important. And in the meantime, listen to what your child has to say about it.
Why I bring up this question, I have 2 experiences of a parent with this very issue.
Yeah.
The child was asked to go and study Ureka. Catering.
Oh, Ureka. Yeah, Ureka. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So the child was she was so depressed that the parents, because of that, take him out from Netherlands to England. Right now, she's a graduate of law in England.
Yeah.
Second one is the same thing.
Yeah.
So that can make a frustration because, like you said, advice of the teacher. Sometimes they do make a wrong impression of the children.
Yeah.
And their advice is not that, does not go in line, because we Africans, we know what we want.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, but in that particular case, it can also make a huge difference if you are in the Dutch education system or in the British education system. That can also make a difference, of course. And and we're still people. And I hope when you have a conversation at the school with your child, that you can trust on the fact that they're not randomly doing something. Sometimes we see at school a completely different child than you see at home, or vice versa. And if that's the case, it's important to stay in contact with the school, with the teacher, to give your opinion. As I said, we also have experienced that after we had the conversation with the parent, we switched the advice because we said, with this information, with these insights, with this vision on the situation or how the child is learning, we get you, and we find each other, and sometimes we don't, and you have to take a decision, and sometimes it's hard, but it's not, if they're not directly going to the university, there's always another way to get there. Sometimes that's just a situation. Yeah.
Can I say something just to add? So I'm very new in secondary education, we all know that. But every year, at least with the little 1 year experience or 3 years experience I've had, every year a child gets a chance to either go forward or backwards. So even if a bad advice has been given by a teacher that is biased in a way, the next teacher will not be biased. The next teacher will be reasonable. So, and it's not just one person that is giving this advice, a group of teachers. So if my advice is really bad, the next person, they will look at it logically. So that 1 year, the child will either go forward, maybe from BBO to AVO, or from AVO to BBO, or from even MBO, CADA to TL. So 1 year, that 1 year, you can work on your child and make your child move forward. Just like Mommy said, from TL to BBO in 1 or 2 years. And also someone gave a testimony last Sunday from AVO. She came into the Netherlands with AVO advice, but she wanted VVO, and within maybe a year, I don't know how long, she got VVO. So there is opportunity.
Yeah. Some of the secondary schools have combination groups, like TL HAVO or HAVO VWO. So if the advice is HAVO, but there is a potential to VWO, they can go to some combination group, and within a year, as you said, they can switch to the VWO. Yeah, that's also possible. Yeah, it's not only if they have their diploma, but also during the 4 or 5 years of the secondary school. Yeah.
So just to be sure that I get what everybody is saying correctly, there is a limitation of what the child can study if the child is recommended for maybe MBO, AVO, or something. So for example, a child wants to become a doctor and the child is probably recommended for VMBO. That means the child can't do that.
Theoretically, there's a possibility if the child gets the advice TL, they can end up being a doctor at the university. That's possible.
So there is no limitation as to what the child can study in that.
Theoretically, there's no limitation. In the practical way, there can be a limitation in if it suits the student in that way of education type. Maybe somewhere halfway they think, oh, well, I can do this job with this education, I want to do that. So theoretically, yes. Practically, there are numbers of different routes. But theoretically, yes, it's possible.
Okay, so
yeah.
The second question is, yes, I can have the second question is about a child that is learning Dutch as the second or third language. As a parent, I know you mentioned that we can read to them. I mean, probably from age 1 or something. So it doesn't matter if you're reading to them in English or Dutch or...
we prefer your mother tongue.
Okay.
Because that is the language you manage very well. If they have managed the mother tongue also really well, the Dutch language will come. The most confusing part is when a child learns, for example, three languages at a time, and there's not a base language that they manage excellent because it's the first language. So we always give the advice, talk the language at home, what is your mother tongue, and also read the books in your mother tongue. Yeah.
Yeah, so the baseline of my concern is actually, for example, if a child has homework, I believe they are taught in Dutch in school.
Yeah.
If they have homework, how do you help them with it, especially as a parent that is... What if I'm...
Yeah, I think I know where you're going. I get the question a lot from parents who say, I want to help my children, especially when they become in the higher groups. I want to help them with the homework, but I'm not capable of doing that because I do not manage the Dutch language myself that good. Yeah, there are different solutions. You can use Translate, for example, or ask your child to explain it to you in Dutch, because that's also good for their own Dutch development. Because if you can explain something in the language, then you manage it well. Sometimes children look up for each other, that they are doing homework with a school friend. So that depends. Some parents say, well, this is a motivation for me to learn the Dutch language better. But yeah, I hear different kind of solutions to the problem. Yeah.
Right. I have two questions. The first question is, so we know that universally, right, education is acceptable everywhere. The basis for most tertiary education is the university. However, in the Netherlands, we then have this differentiation. Mm-hmm. What's the parallel for an MBO in, say, other countries? Do you know? Like, what's the parallel? Because they can really work with an MBO in the Netherlands, but they can't work with an MBO in Nigeria. You can't work with an HBO in Nigeria. If I use it as an example, even in the US, you can't work with an MBO.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I only know it the other way around. When they come over here, their diploma needs to be translated. So, for example, if teachers come over from Suriname to the Netherlands, we really need to be checked if it's on the same level that the teachers are graduated on the Netherlands. I'm not quite sure how it works the other way around. No, I'm sorry.
All right. My other question, so when you started, you said the Almere has 80 schools, right?
Yes.
I think 20 of them are private, Christian. I don't remember the statistics, but you broke it down into the various schools, and I recognize that there are indeed private schools in this mix. Does private mean individual owned?
Yeah, I think Almere has 1 or 2 private schools.
Individual owned?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and parents have to pay every month for the school, and it can go up to, I think, 1,500 euros per month.
Okay.
And from my own experience, it's not like the education is way much better than the other schools.
Okay, I mean, but it exists, right? So my writing question on that is it possible for an individual to, or maybe not because we know it's possible, what's the step to own a school in the Netherlands? Considering that the Turkish do have schools, the Indian have schools, what would it take me to own a school in the Netherlands?
I haven't studied that part of my job. I know you are able to start your own school. For example, 5 years ago, we had a new school in Almere Buiten. It's called School of the Vrede. Everyone can start a primary school. And the first 3 years, I think, you have to set up your school before the inspection comes by to see if you're doing the right thing. I think if you take a look at the website of the Inspection of Education, I think you will get the answer. onderwijsinspectie.nl.
It's in the list. We'll share the slides after the... And then two questions from me. Is the first is, I can't remember the first one. Okay. The second question is, I know that in schools, children are now being taught with laptops, tablets, and the likes. But we also have concerns about the number of time, duration the children spend. So what's your recommendation, your professional recommendation? How do we deal with them? How long can they spend, or is it recommended for them to spend on devices? Because we also know that there are lots of books they can read online, so many exercises. So how do we handle that?
Yeah. Well, if I Google it, I can find an exact number of minutes per age. As we see it as teachers at our school, I think it's important to teach the children how to behave online, to know how to use the devices, and as I said, how to use the different opportunities of those devices. In our school, the learning part is still with books and pencils. Different research has shown that the brain works best when you're physically active. Which doesn't mean that we need to prepare them for the jobs in 20 years, which will be mostly digital. So it is part of an education system. And it's not always a bad thing that they are at the iPad or tablets or laptops. But it depends on what is the goal and how much are you involved as a parent. Do you know what they are doing? Are you interested in what they are doing? And yes, there is, I don't know it from my head, but how many minutes would be okay for children to be behind the screen? But where things mostly go wrong is that we are a little older than our children, and we grew up in another time. So the apps they are using, the things they see on a daily basis, we are not as much. I don't have TikTok, but as a parent, you should know what TikTok is and what they see and what they get from those apps. And one of my colleagues is a media coach, as we call it. And the most important thing is be interested in what your child is doing online. And yes, of course, they should not be on the screen when they come home at halfway the afternoon till you get ready for dinner, and then after school time again, because playing outside is also really important. But be involved in what your child is doing is important. And yes, there are loads of apps they can learn something from, and that's okay. And yeah, the number of time, you can find it online.
Yeah, thank you.
But be involved is my advice as an expert from school.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone?
Your first question?
Yeah, I can't remember. So if I remember, I can't remember the first question anymore.
Please, I want to know, where do we go to if you want to know if your child have ADHD or autism?
Yeah, there are two routes. If you think as a parent, well, I see something with my child and I want to define it, then you go to your huisarts. That's when you decide to do that as a parent. The other way is when a school, we have conversation with the school and they say, well, we see something which we cannot exactly tell what it is, then you can get a research. A school has at our school it's called NDO, multidisciplinair overleg. Sometimes it's called zorgadviesteam. There are different names for that, but it's a group of experts from internal the school, external. They discuss the question you have as a parent or as the school has, and then the jeugdarts. Every school is jeugdarts. Yeah, then you will be called at the jeugdarts, you as a parent with your child, and they can recommend the right institute for the research. And Almere has different institutes. For example, Van Heesen, Molenman, Max Ernst, JGZ. So there are different institutes who can help you with that question.
Is it at your own estimate or is free?
Sorry, is it?
Is it at your, do you pay for it? Or
If you do this via the huisarts as a parent yourself, then you have to pay it yourself. If it's going via school and jeugdarts, then it's paid by, I don't know who pays it exactly, but not you as a parent. Yeah.
All right, I think, one more question. Last question.
It's a bit more related to secondary, but I know that in the secondary school, they do assign a class teacher and then a mentor and then subject teachers. The mentor happens to be the one that corresponds mostly with the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the role of the class teacher then if the class teacher is not the mentor? Like, how do you get that full picture of how your child is, behaving in school, and really how much of influence? Because mentor means to us somebody who directly impacts your child. I know that's not exactly what it means here, or it's not that, it's not the English mentor, but how do you differentiate the role of that mentor and then the class teacher, on your child?
Yeah, most of the time the mentor is a teacher who also has the class. The mentor is also a teacher of a subject. For example, if you are the English teacher, you can also be a mentor of a group. My experience is that they once a period have gatherings, studiedagen, vergaderingen. That your child will be a day off because then they meet each other, and then they gather all the information about how a student is doing in the different classes. But I think every secondary school has its own way of gathering that information, because I also know a secondary school who only works with a digital program, and that when we have a conversation with a mentor, because some schools give us some information 1 year after the students leave our school, so when they finish first class, the mentor gets in contact with us to get some information. Sometimes they just do what they see in the digital system, and other mentors have had conversations with different teachers. Yeah, I take a look at you, because that's probably how it goes at your school. So the mentor is the one who sees the student most of the time, because they have the mentor hour mostly, and the subject they teach themselves. And yes, they don't know the student as well as a teacher in primary school does. Because if a teacher works full-time, he's 5 days a week with the same teacher. The teacher knows the child very well. And even if you have 2 days a week, you still know the child really well. And there's a big difference between primary and secondary. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other question?
Wow. Well, we want to thank you for your time and having to go through the rigor of also giving us this presentation in English language. We really thank you. We appreciate your time, your coming here. And I think even far beyond now, the enlightenment you have given to us will still be useful to people that are not here now. So we are so much grateful. And as a church also, we want to express our thanks to you with this token. So, yeah, we know. This is on behalf of Living Faith Assembly. So with this, as a token, and we hope to see you again, probably. And I know that probably there's more pressure on us to organize something like this. We know we can always get in touch. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to give you some more information. Of course, it's just the opinion of one person. If you ask another principal, maybe you get other answers. This is also partially my personal opinion and my personal experience. But I'm really thankful. Sorry, I have a loud voice. It was really a pleasure to be invited for this, to share my experience, to share my expertise. You have my email address, so if another question pops up, you can always send me an email. our call to the Dugdal. Yeah, and good luck with your children and stay close to them.
Thank you very much. I've ended it. Yeah.